This is a quick introductory note. This is a huge undertaking, like 2,000 pages or something in a PDF. Who knows if it'll get done or not. And also, the editing will probably be shoddy and the audio whispered almost sometimes because it's read late at night. I hope this book brings you and all you encounter great benefit for your long-term well-being and that of others, especially in the long term. This is the book titled Buddhadhamma, The Laws of Nature and Their Benefits to Life by Bhikkhu P.A. Payutto, translated by Robin Philip Moore. Skipping over the introductions, going straight to part one. There's two sutta quotes here before we get started. Venerable Sir, it is said, quote, the world. In what way might there be the world or the description of the world? And then the Buddha says, where there is the I, samiti, there are forms, I consciousness, things to be cognized by I consciousness. There the world exists, or the description of the world. Where there is ear, ... the mind. Where there are mental phenomena, mind consciousness, things to be cognized by mind consciousness. There the world exists, or the description of the world. And just a note, the ... here is things that are just taken as given for a repeat, but it goes through the 5 sense spaces and then through the 6th sense at the end there, the mind or mental. The other quote is, there is form, monks. By clinging to form, by adhering to form, there arises the view, quote, that which is the self is the world. Having passed away, I shall be permanent, lasting, eternal, not subject to change. When there is feeling, ... perception, ... volitional formation, ... consciousness, ... by clinging to consciousness, there arises the view, that which is self is the world. Having passed away, I shall be permanent, lasting, eternal, not subject to change. And then we get into section 1, Nature of Human Life, chapter 1, 5 Aggregates, chapter 2, 6 Sense Spheres. Chapter 1, the 5 Aggregates, the 5 Constituents of Life, 1.1 Introduction. From the perspective of Buddhadhamma, all things exist according to their own nature. They do not exist as separate fixed entities, as in the case of living creatures. They are not distinct and immutable beings or persons which one could validly take to be a legitimate owner of things, or which are able to govern things according to their wishes. Everything that exists in the world exists as a collection of convergent parts. There exists no inherent self or substantial essence within things. When one separates the constituent parts from each other, no self or core remains. A frequent scriptural analogy for this is of a vehicle. When one assembles the various parts according to one's chosen design, one assigns the conventional term wagon to the end product. Yet if one disassembles the parts, no essence of a wagon can be found. All that remains are the various parts, each of which is given its own specific name. This fact implies that the self or entity of a vehicle does not exist separate from its constituent parts. The term car, for example, is simply a conventional designation. Moreover, all those constituent parts may also be separated into further parts, none of which possesses a stable, fixed essence. So when one states that something exists, one needs to understand it in this context, that it exists as a collection of inconstant constituent elements. Having made this claim, the Buddha's teachings go on to describe the primary elements or constituents that make up the world. But because the Buddha's teachings pertain directly to human life, and in particular to the mind, this elucidation of the constituent parts encompasses both mind and matter, both mentality, namadhamma, and corporeality, rupadhamma. Here, special emphasis is given to the analysis of the mind. There are many ways to present this division into separate constituents of life, depending on the objective of the specific analysis. This chapter presents the division into the 5 aggregates, which is the preferred analysis in the suttas. In Buddhadhamma, the human living entity, what is referred to as a person or a living being, is divided into 5 groups or categories. Number 1, rupa, corporeality, body, material form, all material constituents, the body and all physical behavior, matter and physical energy, along with the properties and course of such energy. Number 2, Vedana, feeling, sensation, the feelings of pleasure, pain, and neutral feelings arising from contact by way of the 5 senses and by way of the mind. Number 3, Sanya, perception, the ability to recognize and to designate the perception and discernment of various signs, characteristics, and distinguishing features, enabling one to remember a specific object of attention. Sankara, mental formations, volitional activities. These mental constituents or properties with intention as leader, which shape the mind as wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral, and which shape a person's thoughts and reflections, as well as verbal and physical behavior. They are the source of karma, intentional action. Examples of such mental formations include faith, saddha, mindfulness, sati, moral shame, hiri, fear of wrongdoing, ottappa, loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, appreciative joy, mudita, equanimity, upekkha, wisdom, panya, delusion, moha, greed, lobha, hatred, dosa, conceit, mana, views, ditthi, jealousy, isa, and stinginess, macharaya. They are the agents or fashioners of the mind, of thought, and of intentional action. And number 5, vijnana, consciousness, conscious awareness of objects by way of the 5 senses. That is, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling tangible objects, and awareness of mind objects. There are several points to bear in mind in reference to the final 4 aggregates comprising the mental aggregates, the Nama Kanda. Perception, sanya, is a form of knowledge. It refers to the perception or discernment of an object's attributes and properties, including its shape, appearance, color, etc., as well as its name and conventional designations. For example, one knows that an object is green, white, black, red, loud, faint, bass, high-pitched, fat, thin, a table, a pin, a pig, a dog, a fish, a cat, a person, him, her, me, you, etc. Perception relies on the encounter or comparison between previous experience or knowledge and new experience or knowledge. If one's current experience corresponds with previous experience, say one meets someone familiar or hears a familiar sound, one has recognition. Note that this is not the same as memory. For example, Mr. Jones knows Mr. Smith. A month later, they meet and Mr. Jones recognizes Mr. Smith. If a new experience does not correspond with previous experiences, people tend to compare it to previous experience or knowledge, looking at those aspects that are either similar or different. Then they identify the object according to their labels or designations, determined by the similarities and differences. This is the process of perception, or of designation and identification. There are many layers to perception, including perception in accord with common agreement and understanding. For example, green, white, yellow, and red. Perception in accord with social conventions and traditions. That is, for example, this is polite, this is beautiful, this is normal, and this is abnormal. Perception according to personal preferences and conceptions. For example, this is attractive, this is admirable, and this is irritating. Perception based on multiple factors. Perception of symbolism. For example, green and red represents this university, and 2 rings of a bell designates mealtime. And perception according to spiritual learning, for example, perception of impermanence and perception of insubstantiality. There is both common everyday perceptions and subtle refined perceptions. That is perception that is intricately connected to the other aggregates. There's perception of matter and perception of the mind. The various terms used for sana, such as recognition, remembering, designation, assignation, attribution, and ideation, all describe aspects of this aggregate of perception. Simply speaking, perception is the process of collecting, compiling, and storing data and information, which is the raw material for thought. Perception is very helpful to people, but at the same time, it can be detrimental. This is because people tend to attach to their perceptions, which end up acting as an obstruction, obscuring and eclipsing reality, and preventing one from penetrating a deeper underlying truth. A useful and practical division of perception, sana, is in two kinds: ordinary perceptions, which discern the attributes of sense objects as they naturally arise, and secondary or overlapping perceptions. The latter are sometimes referred to by specific terms, in particular as proliferative perception, papanchasanya, perception resulting from intricate and fanciful mental proliferation driven by the force of craving, tanha, conceit, mana, and views, ditthi, which are at the vanguard of negative mental formations, negative sankhara. This division highlights the active role of perception and shows the relationship between perception and other aggregates within mental processes. Consciousness, vijnana, is traditionally defined as awareness of sense objects. It refers to a prevailing or constant form of knowing. It is both the basis and the channel for the other mental aggregates, and it functions in association with them. It is both a primary and an accompanying form of knowledge. It is primary in the sense that it is an initial form of knowledge. When one sees something, that is, visual consciousness arises, one may feel pleasure or distress equals feeling minus Vedana. One then identifies the object, perception minus sanya, or is it perception dash sanya, followed by various intentions in thought, volitional formations, sankhara. For example, one sees the sky equals vijnana and feels delighted, Vedana. One knows the sky to be bright, beautiful, the color of indigo, an afternoon sky equals sanya, perception. One is delighted by the sky and wishes to admire it for a long, uninterrupted period of time. One resents the fact that one's view is obstructed, and one wonders how one can find a place to watch the sky at one's leisure, equals sankhara formations. Consciousness is an accompanying form of knowledge in that one knows in conjunction with the other aggregates. When one feels happy, that equals Vedana feeling, one knows that one is happy, vijnana. Note that the feeling of happiness is not the same as knowing that one is happy. When one suffers, Vedana, one knows one is suffering, vijnana. Perceiving something as pleasurable or painful, sanya, one knows accordingly. And when one engages in various thoughts and intentions, sankhara, there is a continual concomitant awareness of this activity. This prevailing stream of awareness, which is in a continual process of arising and ceasing, and which accompanies the other mental aggregates or is part of every aspect of mental activity, is called consciousness, vijnana. Another special characteristic of consciousness is that it is an awareness of particulars, a knowledge of specific aspects, or a form of discriminative knowledge. This may be understood by way of examples. When one sees, say, a striped piece of cloth, although one may not initially identify it as such, one discerns specific attributes, for example, its colors, which are distinct from one another. Once consciousness discerns these distinctions, perception, sanya, identifies them, says as green, white, or red. When one eats a particular kind of fruit, although one may not yet have identified the flavor as sweet or sour, one already has an awareness of such distinctions. Similarly, although one may have not yet distinguished between the specific kinds of sourness of, say, pineapples, lemons, tamarind, or plums, or between the specific kinds of sweetness, say, of mangoes, bananas, or apples, by tasting the flavor, one is aware of its distinctive nature. This basic form of knowing is consciousness, vijnana. Once this awareness arises, the other mental aggregates begin to operate. For example, one experiences the flavor as delicious or unsavory. That's Vedana. Or one identifies the flavor as one particular kind of sweetness or sourness equals sanya, perception. The knowledge of specific aspects referred to above may be explained thus. When consciousness arises, for example, when one sees a visual object, in fact, one is seeing only specific attributes or facets of that object in question. In other words, one sees only those aspects or angles that one gives importance to depending on the mental formation, sankhara, which condition the arising of consciousness, vijnana. For example, in a wide expanse of countryside grows one sole mango tree. It is a large tree, yet it bears only a few pieces of fruit, and in this season is almost barren of leaves, providing very little shade. On different occasions, 5 separate people visit this tree. One man is fleeing from a dangerous animal. One man is starving. One man is hot and looking for shade. One man is searching for fruit to sell at the market. And the last man is looking for a spot to tie up his cattle so that he may visit a nearby village. All 5 men see the same tree, but each one sees it in a different way. For each one, I consciousness arises, but this consciousness varies depending on their aims and intentions in regard to this tree. Similarly, their perception of the tree will also differ according to the aspects of the tree that they look at. Even their feelings, Vedana, will differ. The man fleeing from danger will rejoice because he sees a means to escape. The starving man will be delighted because the 3 to 4 mangoes will save him from starvation. The man suffering from heat may be disappointed because the tree does not provide as much shade as it normally would. The man looking for fruit may be upset because of the paucity of fruit, and the man driving his cattle may be relieved to find a temporary shelter for them. Feeling, Vedana, refers to the sensing of sense impressions or of experiencing their flavor. It refers to the feeling or sensation arising every time there is contact and cognition of sense objects. These feelings may be pleasurable and agreeable, painful or oppressive, or neutral. To avoid confusion with the aggregate of mental formations, sankhara, it is important to note that feeling, Vedana, is an activity at the level of reception. It pertains exclusively to the immediate effect an object has on the mind. It does not pertain to the stage of intention or of acting in response to sense impressions, which is the function of mental formations, sankhara. For this reason, such terms as like, dislike, delight,
and aversion usually refer to the activity of mental formations, which involves a subsequent level of activity. These terms normally refer to volitional activities or to reactions to sense impressions, as illustrated on Figure 1.1 about mental processes. In Figure 1.1, feeling Vedana and mental formation Sankara, the first box says seeing an attractive visual form. Then it goes to pleasure, and then to delight in that object. And then the other group of boxes goes from hearing an annoying noise, then to displeasure, and then to aversion to that object. Feeling, Vedana, plays a pivotal role in the lives of sentient creatures because it is both desired and sought after in the case of pleasure, and feared and avoided in the case of pain. Each time there is contact and cognition of a sense object, feeling acts as the juncture, directing or motivating the other mental factors. For example, if one contacts a pleasurable sense object, one pays special attention to it and perceives it in ways that reciprocate or make the most out of that sensation. One then thinks up strategies for repeating or extending one's experience of this object. Mental formations, or sankhara, refer to both the factors determining the quality of the mind, the fashioners of the mind, with intention, cetana, as chief, and the actual volitional process in which these factors are selected and combined in order to shape and mold one's thoughts, words, and deeds, resulting in physical, verbal, and mental karma. In any case, the traditional analysis of the five aggregates focuses on the components of reality rather than focusing on the various dynamics in nature that affect human life. For this reason, the description of mental formations, sankhara, in this context normally only mentions a list of these determining factors, the fashioners of the mind, along with their attributes. As for an explanation of conditioned processes, at which stage these factors reveal themselves are set in motion, this is reserved for the analysis of dependent origination, which demonstrates precisely how these factors affect people's lives. In the teachings of dependent origination, mental formations, sankhara, are defined in the context of practical application or operative function. They are divided into kaya sankhara, physical, intentional, bodily activity, bodily volition; vicha sankhara, verbal intention activity, verbal volition; and chitta sankhara, mental intentional activity, mental volition. This differs from the analysis of mental formations in the exposition of the five aggregates, in which various determining factors are simply presented in a list: faith, saddha; mindfulness, sati; loving kindness, metta; compassion, karuna; wisdom, panya; greed, lobha; hatred, dosa; intention, cetana; and concentration, samadhi. If one compares these analyses to a motor show, the analysis of the five aggregates is similar to laying out all of a car's parts for people to see, while the analysis of dependent origination is like demonstrating the car as it is being driven on the road. Of all the determining factors of mind, intention, cetana, is leader or chief. No matter how many mental formations are operative at any one time, intention always participates as the key factor in the process. For this reason, the term cetana is sometimes used alone to represent all of the mental formations, sankhara. Sankhara in this context can thus be defined as intention, cetana, along with associated factors, connected factors, which shapes the mind as good, bad, or neutral, and which determines thoughts, speech, and physical actions, giving rise to mental, verbal, and physical karma. Besides occasionally representing or defining all mental formations, sankhara, the term cetana is also used to define or represent the term karma In this sense, these three terms, Sankara, Cetana, and Kama, all have roughly the same meaning. To offer an analogy, Venerable Mani, the abbot of Majjhima Monastery, goes to receive an offering of Tipitaka books. At the formal gathering, the announcement of the honored guest may state Venerable Mani, or the abbot of Majjhima Monastery, or simply Majjhima Monastery. All three terms express the desired meaning. Besides its central role, intention, Cetana, also reveals the special and distinctive properties of mental formation Sankara, which set this aggregate apart from the others. Cetana may be translated as intention, volition, purpose, or deliberation. The special attribute differentiating mental formations, Sankara, from the other mental aggregates is that they can originate spontaneously. The other mental aggregates of feeling, perception, and consciousness, on the other hand, operate or function with the sense impressions that are immediately manifesting in the mind. They are associated with and attend to these sense impressions, and they rely on the reception of them in order to function. Mental formations, however, both deliberate over sense impressions and act in response to them. These explanations may clarify the following questions. Why are feelings of ease and dis-ease classified as sensations, Vedana, while the subsequent factors of liking and disliking are classified as mental formations, Sankara? Why are perception, Sanya, recollection, and mindfulness, Sati, memory, classified into separate aggregates? Sati is included among the mental formations, Sankara. Why is wisdom, Panya, which, similar to perception, Sanya, and consciousness, Vijnana, is a form of knowledge, classified as a mental formation, Sankara? This ends Chapter 1.1. Chapter 1.2, Sana and Sati, memory, recollection, and mindfulness. There tends to be confusion among Buddhist scholars as to which mental factor in the Pali vocabulary corresponds to memory. Sana is often translated as recollection, whereas Sati may be translated as mindfulness, recollection, recall, or memory. In regards to the latter term, there are some prominent sutta examples. For example, the passage in praising Venerable Ananda as foremost among the Bhikkhu disciples in remembering the Buddha's words. In this context, the Buddha uses the term Sati. Of all my disciples, Ananda is supreme in memory, Sati. In the formal teachings, there is no confusion about this matter. Memory is not the exclusive function of just one mental factor, but rather it is a part of a mental process within which perception, Sanya, and mindfulness, Sati, play the most prominent and important roles. Both the terms Sanya and Sati have overlapping meanings in respect to the concept of memory. One aspect of perception, Sanya, has to do with memory, while other aspects are separate from it. This is the same for mindfulness, Sati. One aspect pertains to memory, while other aspects function apart from the memory process. Note these important distinctions between Sanya and Sati in the process of memory. Perception, Sanya, designates and identifies sense objects. When one encounters such objects again, Sanya compares their current features with established perceptions, determining any similarities and differences. If one determines that the two, the old perceptions and the new, correspond, this may be called recognition. If there are differences, one creates additional perceptions. The term Sanya refers both to the recognition, designation, and identification of objects, the comparison and accumulation of data, and to perceptions themselves, the actual data and information created and stored. In this context, Sanya creates the requisite conditions for memory.
The important attribute of sanya is that it engages with sense objects immediately present. When these sense objects manifest, sanya is able to focus on, identify, or remember them. Sati functions to draw sense objects to attention and to hold them firmly in the mind. It directs and sustains attention to sense objects, preventing them from drifting by or slipping away. These sense objects may be currently manifesting, or they may have occurred in the past. The term sati thus encompasses such nuances of meaning as recall, recollection, calling to mind, reflection, remembering, and attentiveness. In the context of memory, it remembers and enables recall. In this sense, sati is the opposite of sammosa, which means forgetting. Sanya is not paired with forgetting. Sati is generated from within an individual, relying on the power of volition, even when sense objects are not immediately manifest. Because it is a volitional response to sense objects, it is classified as a mental formation, sankhara. Sanya records and notes sense objects. Sati draws sense objects to attention. Both a healthy perception, the ability to identify things clearly, to designate things in a well-ordered and structured way, and to integrate and connect things, which relies on attentiveness and understanding, and a strong recall, the ability to recollect, which relies on clear perceptions, constant mindfulness, and a bright, peaceful, and concentrated mind, are factors for a good memory. At one time in the past, Robert and Jake knew each other well. 10 years later, they meet again, and Robert recognizes Jake and remembers the places they once visited and the activities they once shared. The recognition of the other person is sanya, where the recollection of past events is sati. On one occasion, Greg meets and talks with Carl. A month later, Greg's friends ask him who he met and spoke with on that specific date. Greg reflects on the past and remembers that he met with Carl. This recollection is sati. A telephone is located on one corner of a room, and a phone book is located in another. Karen opens the book and finds the number she's looking for. She makes a note of this number in her mind and then walks to the telephone to dial it. As she crosses the room, she keeps this number constantly in her attention. The reading and noting of the number from the book is sanya. The recall of that number from the moment she leaves the book is sati. When sense objects become manifest, one is able to perceive them immediately. Yet, when they do not manifest, and in the same case that they are mind objects, matters inherent in the mind, one can use sati in order to draw them forth and focus on them. Moreover, sati is able to call perceptions to mind, that is, it can recollect past perceptions to be the objects of attention. Sanya is then able to identify, clarify, and consolidate these previous perceptions, or to perceive them in a new way according to one's aims and objectives. Just a quick note there, if I'm pronouncing sanya right, I pronounced it once, I think, named sana. This is an S-A-N-N-A in English letters with diacriticals over the N's and A, different diacriticals. Chapter 1.3, Perception, Consciousness, and Wisdom. Perception, sana, consciousness, vijnana, and wisdom, panya, are all aspects of knowledge, yet they are part of three distinct aggregates. The first two factors described earlier in this chapter constitute an aggregate in themselves, whereas wisdom is classified among the mental formations, sankhara. Wisdom, panya, refers generally to understanding, and more specifically to comprehensive or clear understanding, to a thorough and accurate understanding of the truth. The term panya is defined in many different ways, including knowledge of causality, knowledge of good and evil, knowledge of right and wrong, knowledge of suitability, knowledge of benefit and harm,
knowledge of advantages and disadvantages, thorough knowledge of conditioned phenomena, knowledge of constituent factors, knowledge of causes and conditions, knowledge of origin and destination, knowledge of the interrelationship of things, knowledge according to the truth, genuine knowledge, genuine understanding, knowledge of reality, and knowing how to reflect on, contemplate, analyze, and engage with or manage things and situations. Simply speaking, wisdom is clear, correct, and genuine understanding. Wisdom possesses an insight into reality, and it penetrates into the heart of problems. It supports both perception, sanya, and consciousness, vijnana. In regards to the latter, it broadens and deepens the range of consciousness. Likewise, in regard to the former, it increases the range of perception, because the cognition and apprehension of things is dependent on one's knowledge. This is similar to solving mathematical problems. As long as one cannot solve the initial equations, one has no data or criteria for further calculations. With increased understanding, one possesses the markers or raw material for further perception and analysis. Wisdom, panya, stands in opposition to delusion, moha, ignorance, misunderstanding, whereas perception, sanya, and consciousness, vijnana, are not contrasted with delusion in this way. Indeed, perception and consciousness may fall prey to delusion. When one is deluded and confused, one's conscious experience and perceptions are equally distorted. Wisdom assists here to rectify both consciousness and perception. Perception, sanya, and consciousness, vijnana, rely on currently manifesting sense objects in order to function. Images or concepts of these sense objects are thus created and discerned. Wisdom, on the other hand, reflects on sense objects and responds actively to them. Wisdom is a deliberate faculty and is thus classified among the volitional formations, sankhara. It links various sense impressions with each other, analyzes their various attributes, compares and considers various perceptions, and discerns cause-effect interrelationship and the ways to benefit from things. By doing this, it provides consciousness and perception with wholesome food for engagement. Venerable Sariputta once responded to the question on how wisdom, panya, and consciousness, vijnana, differ. He explained that wisdom knows, understands, knows clearly that this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the way leading to the end of suffering. Consciousness, on the other hand, knows equals discriminative understanding that this is pleasure, this is pain, this is neither pleasure nor pain. Wisdom and consciousness, however, are intimately entwined and in a sense inseparable. Having said this, there is a distinction in that wisdom is a quality to be trained and developed in order to increase and strengthen it. In contrast, consciousness is a quality to be fully understood. Its nature and its attributes should be truly recognized and understood. Commentarial text, including the Visuddhimagga, explain the distinction between perception, sanya, consciousness, vijnana, and wisdom, panya, in this way. Perception, sanya, simply recognizes the properties of a sense object. Say that it is green or yellow. It is unable to understand the characteristics of impermanent dukkha and non-self. Consciousness, vijnana, also knows the object's properties of green, yellow, etc., and it is able to understand the characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. It understands according to the counsel and guidance by wisdom, but it cannot deliver one to the actualization of the path i.e., to the realization of the Four Noble Truths. Wisdom, however, accomplishes all three. It knows the property of sense objects, it discerns the three characteristics, and it enables the actualization of the path. The commentaries use the analogy of three people who look at the same coin. Perception, sanya, is like a young child who simply discerns the shape of the coin: small, large, square, or round, its color, attractive sheen, and strange markings. He does not know that it is an agreed upon means of trade and exchange. Consciousness, vijnana, is like an adult who discerns the shape, markings, etc. of the coin and who knows that it is used for trade and exchange, but he does not possess the deeper understanding of whether the coin is genuine or counterfeit, or of what combinations of metal were used to mint the coin. Wisdom is like a treasurer who discerns all of the above data and in addition possesses expert knowledge to the extent that he may look at, tap and listen to, smell, taste, or weigh the coin in his hands and know everything about it, including where and by whom it was made. Moreover, wisdom does not always arise. It may happen that only perception and consciousness arise, devoid of wisdom. Yet when wisdom arises alongside these other two qualities, it is difficult to distinguish one from the other. When Jali and Kanha sought a hiding place, they walked backwards into the lotus pond, convinced that their pursuer would think that they had only recently come out of the pond. This line of thinking on their part may be referred to as wisdom, panya. Later, Vesantara saw their footprints and knew immediately that they had walked backwards into the pond. This was because there were only prints leading away from the pond and none leading towards it. And the impression in the prints was deepest at the heels. This understanding may also be referred to as wisdom. The children and their father applied different levels of wisdom and circumspection, which indicates how wisdom, panya, derives benefit from perception, sanya. Prince Siddhartha saw an old person, a sick person, and a human corpse, and as a result, he reflected on and discerned the suffering to which everyone is prone without exception. He then went on to understand how all conditioned things are impermanent, subject to arising, to alteration, and eventually to passing away, and he saw the need to bring an end to the suffering based on these conditions, to end the suffering based on these conditions. These are all examples of wisdom, panya. When the Buddha was preparing to establish Buddhism in the Magadha country, he went to visit the matted hair ascetics of the Kassapa clan who were revered by the people of Magadha in order that they gain confidence in and endorse the Buddha's teaching. The insight and intuition behind this line of thinking by the Buddha is also an expression of wisdom. The term panya is a general term describing the kinds of knowledge mentioned above. There are many different levels of wisdom, for example, mundane wisdom and transcendent wisdom. There are many other Pali terms indicating specific levels, degrees, or aspects of wisdom, or referring to its specific activities, qualities, or benefits. For example, jnana, knowledge; vijja, true knowledge; vipassana, insight; sampajanya, clear comprehension; parina, thorough knowledge; abhinna, supreme knowledge; and patisamhina, discriminative knowledge. Chapter 1.4, Relationship between the Aggregates. The five aggregates are interdependent. The aggregate of corporality, rupa kanda, comprises the body, while the four aggregates of mentality, namakanda, make up the mind. Human life requires both the body and the mind. When the body and mind function normally and operate in unison, life progresses well. Mental activities, for example, require an understanding of the external world, and this understanding relies on sense data, visual forms, sounds, odors, tastes, and tangible objects, entering by way of ear, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. Both the five sense objects and the five sense faculties are material things, rupa, dhamma, and part of the aggregate of corporality. They are part of materiality. In this chapter, the emphasis is on the mind, considering the body to be similar to a ready-made instrument prepared to serve mental activities. The mind is considered to be the focal point of life, and its range of functions is vast, complex, and profound. The mind gives value and meaning to life and is directly connected to the teachings by the Buddha presented in this book. The four aggregates of mentality are intimately related, influencing and conditioning one another. The arising of these four aggregates is ordinarily outlined in the following way. Dependent on I and forms, eye consciousness arises. Similarly with ear and sounds, nose and odors, etc. The meaning of the three is contact. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. ... Here's an example. Gordon hears the sound of a bell, ear plus sound plus ear consciousness. He finds the sound pleasant, equals Vedana. He perceives the sound as melodious, the ringing of a bell and the sound of a melodious bell, Sanya. He likes the sound and wants to hear it again. He thinks about striking that bell himself. He wants to obtain the bell. He thinks about buying or stealing the bell, etc. Sankara. Note the crucial role of feeling Vedana in this process. Perception sanya plays particular focus on those objects providing pleasurable sensations. The greater the pleasure, the greater the importance bestowed on the object by perception. In addition, such pleasurable feeling incites people to think and act in order to increase the pleasure. One may describe this as a basic, ordinary, or elementary process. In this process, feeling Vedana acts as the incentive, similar to a person who invites one to take something or to refuse and avoid it. Perception sanya is similar to a person who gathers and stores data or raw material. Mental formation sankara resembles a person who takes this raw material and shapes it in preparation for work. Consciousness vijnana is similar to the director of the work, aware of everyone else's activities. It both opens the way for the work to be performed and it receives the results of the work. One complex aspect of this process is that feeling Vedana does not act as a catalyst for the other aggregates in a one-sided way. The other aggregates, too, have an influence over feeling. Take the example of a single piece of music that one person listens to and finds delightful, whereas another person listens to it and feels depressed. Similarly, the same person may listen to a song at one time and feel elated, while at another time may feel disturbed by it. A general principle is that those things that one likes and finds pleasure in corresponds to one's desire. When one encounters them, one is happy. Inversely, those things one dislikes conflict with one's desires. When one encounters these things, one suffers. The mental formations, say, of liking, disliking, desire, and aversion, then condition another round of feeling. Here, perception is also engaged, that is, mental formations condition perception, which in turn influences feeling. Here's an example. A person may see someone whom he admires behave in a particular way and perceive that behavior as lovely or endearing. He may witness another behavior by someone he dislikes and perceive it as annoying or abhorrent. Later, he may encounter others exhibiting such behavior, which he has previously perceived as either endearing or annoying, sanya, and as a result feel either delighted or distressed, vedana, and either approve of or be angered by it, equals sankara. This relationship between the aggregates can be even more complex. Take, for example, a work project or study lesson that is difficult and demanding. Performing the task alone may involve much turmoil and discomfort, causing one to be disinclined from engaging with it. Yet, if there are particular incentives, one may be more interested and determined to do the work or to pursue the lesson. These incentives may be pleasurable sensations in the present. For example, the method of learning is fun and entertaining, or they may be elaborate matters associated with perceptions of future pleasure, say of gaining a reward, achieving success, or deriving some benefit, either for oneself or for others. These perceptions are dependent on various mental formations. For example, craving, tanha, conceit, mana, and wisdom, panya, which then lead to further perceptions by bestowing meaning, value, and importance to the work or study. Moreover, one now experiences pleasure while performing the deed. Although one may feel physical discomfort, one's mind is imbued with joy, making one more eager to do the work or to complete the lesson. When the school bell rings in the late afternoon, the student hears the sound, vijnana. Having heard this sound every day, they may feel neutral about it, vedana. All of them identify the sound as the bell, denoting the end of the school day, sanya. Some children may be delighted, sukha / vedana plus sankara, because they ache from sitting all day and may now go out and play, equals accompanying perceptions. Other children may be sad, dukkha - vedana plus sankara, because they must interrupt a useful and valuable lesson, or because they must return to unkind and intimidating guardians, equal accompanying perceptions. This entire process, beginning with consciousness, is an intricate interrelationship of causes and conditions which together create people's personalities and determine each person's unique fortune and destiny. Volitional formations, sankara, represented by intention, cetana, are the agents which shape and mold the process, and in this context, sankara is the technical name for volitional action, kamma. Inversely, kamma is the informal title for volitional formations, representing them when they are actively operative. It is a term used when referring to the crucial role that volitional formations play. For example, it is kamma that distinguishes beings as inferior or superior. Beings exist according to their kamma. Chapter 1.5. The Five Aggregates and Clinging to the Five Aggregates. In the Buddha's elucidation of the Four Noble Truths, encapsulating the essence of Buddhism, there is a noteworthy reference to the five aggregates found in the teaching of the First Noble Truth on suffering. At the beginning of the Buddha's explanation of the First Noble Truth, he defines suffering by citing various examples and circumstances, which are easily recognizable and part of people's everyday lives. At the end of this discussion, however, he summarized the entirety of suffering into the single phrase, "The five aggregates of clinging are suffering." Monks, this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering, association with the disliked is suffering, separation from the liked is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, clinging to the five aggregates is suffering. Here, let us look at the distinction between the term khandha by itself as opposed to the term upadana khandha by examining these words of the Buddha. Monks, I will teach you the five aggregates and the five aggregates subject to clinging. Listen attentively. What are the five aggregates? Whatever kind of form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, These are called the five aggregates. What are the five aggregates of clinging? Whatever kind of form, feeling, again, perception, volitional formations, consciousness there is, whether past, future, present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, that is tainted, dasava, accompanied by mental taints, that is the foundation for clinging, upadayana. These are called the five aggregates of clinging. Monks, I will teach you the foundations for clinging and clinging itself. Listen, form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness is the foundation for clinging. The desire and lust, chandaraga, delight or intense desire, accumulating an attachment for form, and I'll skip the dots here, feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness is the clinging there. This distinction between the five aggregates and the five aggregates of clinging is an important principle required for deeper study of Buddhadhamma. 1.6 Practical Application. Ordinarily, human beings are inclined to believe that they possess a true and lasting self in some form or another. Some people attach to their mind as the self. Some believe that something exists separate and yet somehow connected to the mind, which acts on another level to be responsible for and to control the body and mind. The exposition of the five aggregates is intended to reveal how that which is called a being, person, or self, when it is closely examined and analyzed, is simply comprised of these five components. There is no residual essence or substance existing separate from these five. And even these five aggregates exist within an interdependent relationship. They do not exist independently. They are not autonomous. Therefore, these aggregates, too, do not function or exist as a stable, substantial self. In sum, the teachings of the five aggregates refers to the principle of selflessness, anatta, non-self, not self. Human life consists of a convergence of various elements or parts. There exists no substantial self as a unifying principle or a center point of these parts. None of the aggregates, components, etc. exist as a stable, lasting self, and no such self exists apart from them. When one gains insight into this truth, one lets go of one's attachment to self. This principle of non-self is clarified in the teachings on dependent origination in relation to the five aggregates. Furthermore, when one understands that the five aggregates exist in an interrelated and interdependent manner, one does not develop the wrong views of either annihilationism or eternalism. Moreover, this understanding also leads to a correct understanding of the workings of karma. Again, the teachings on dependent origination explains this interrelationship and interdependence in more depth. Examining things by separating them into the five aggregates helps to train one's thinking abilities, and it nurtures the disposition to analyze the truth. When one encounters or engages with something, one does not look simply at surface appearances. Instead, one inclines towards investigation and inquiry of deeper truths. And crucially, this examination leads to an objective discernment of things, to seeing things as they are. This is in contrast to a subjective understanding by which one relates to things by way of craving and grasping, tanha upadana, and sees things according to one's preferences and aversions. An objective understanding is the goal of Buddhadhamma and of this teaching on the five aggregates. Rather than relating to things by way of attachment, craving, and grasping, one relates to them by way of wisdom. In any case, the Buddha normally did not teach about the five aggregates in isolation. In most cases, the five aggregates are the chief factors of consideration within the context of other principles and teachings, which act as a criteria for contemplating and determining the nature and function of these aggregates. The five aggregates need to be examined in relation to other principles, say of non-self anatta, in order to fully appreciate their value on a practical level. The benefits of such contemplation will become clear in subsequent chapters. And I'm just going to read these appendixes. Some people might find them helpful and interesting. So this is additional appendix 1.7, the first appendix. Additional details in regards to the five aggregates: rupa, body, physical form, materiality. The Abhidhamma divides rupa into 28 factors. Number 1, 4 primary elements, referred to simply as 4 elements: dhatu, earth; element of extension, solid element, water; element of cohesion, liquid element, fire; element of heat or radiation, and wind; element of vibration or motion. Number 2, 24 derived material qualities. Derivative materiality, matter resulting from the 4 primary elements. The 5 sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. The 4 sense objects: form, rupa, sound, smell, and taste. Tangible objects are not included here because they are equivalent to the Patavi, Apo, and Vayu, which are the earth, water, and wind elements. Sorry, my Pali translation there was a little bit slow because I didn't put them in English. Continuing here: femininity, masculinity, physical basis of mind, bodily intimation or gesture, verbal intimation, speech, life faculty, it's vitality, vital force, space element, physical lightness, physical pliancy, elasticity, physical adaptability, wieldiness, physical growth or enlargement, physical continuity, decay, disintegration, edible food, nutriment. Note that the term hadayavatu, which is translated as heart, is considered the locus of the citta. Yet this interpretation is expressed in later text. It does not occur in the Tipitaka. On to the next one: Vedana, feeling, sensation. Threefold division: pleasure, sukha, physical and mental; pain, dukkha, physical and mental; neutral feeling, adukkha, masukkha. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. Neither pleasurable nor painful. It is sometimes referred to as upekkha. The fivefold division: physical pleasure, sukha; physical pain, dukkha; happiness, samanasa, unhappiness; domanassa, neutral feeling, upekkha. And then a sixfold division according to its origin doorway: feeling stemming from contact by way of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. On to the third aggregate here: sanya, perception. It is divided into 6 factors according to the pathway of cognition. Number 1, perception of form. For example, black, red, green, or white. Perception of sound. For example, loud, faint, bass, or high-pitched. Number 3, perception of scent. For example, fragrant, or malodorous. Number 4, perception of flavor. For example, sweet, sour, bitter, salty. Number 5, perception of tangibles. For example, soft, hard, coarse, fine, hot, or cold. Perception of mental objects. For example, beautiful, revolting, constant, impermanent. And then the fourth aggregate, sankhara. These are volitional formations. The Abhidhamma divides the mental concomitants, Cittasika, into 52 factors. If one compares this division with the teaching of the 5 aggregates, Khandha, the mental concomitants comprise feeling, Vedana, perception, sanya, and volitional formations. Of the 52 factors, one of them is feeling and another is perception. The remaining 50 factors are all volitional formations. These 50 factors are subdivided as follows: Number 1, 11 mental factors common to both the wholesome and the unwholesome. If one includes Vedana and Sanya here, these constitute 13 factors. These 2 factors are excluded here because they are not volitional formations. Section A, 5 universal mental factors, those arising in every mind moment. These are contact, intention, one-pointedness, life faculty, and mental application. With Vedana and Sanya, these constitute 7 factors. And then B, 6 particular mental factors, those factors common to both the wholesome and the unwholesome, yet they do not arise in every moment. And these are applied thought, sustained thought, determination, effort, joy, and enthusiasm. So, respectively, the Pali is Vitakka, Vikara, Adhimokkha, Virya, Piti, and Chanda. So number 2, 14 unwholesome mental factors arising along with unwholesome mind states. A, 4 universal unwholesome factors. Those factors always present in unwholesome mind states. They are delusion, moha, shamelessness, ahirika, lack of moral dread, anattapa, and restlessness, uddhachara. And B, 10 particular unwholesome factors: greed, lobha, wrong view, ditthi, conceit, mana, hatred, dosa, jealousy, issa, stinginess, macharaya, worry, kukancha, sloth, thinna, torpor, midha, and doubt, vichikara. Number 3, 25 beautiful mental factors arising along with wholesome and indeterminate mind states. A, 19 universal mental factors, and I'll just read the English: faith, mindfulness, conscious, moral dread, non-greed, non-hatred, equanimity, sometimes referred to as upekkha, tranquility of the mental body, tranquility of the collection of mental concomitants. There's tranquility of mind, lightness of mental body, lightness of mind, pliancy of mental body, pliancy of mind, adaptability of the mental body, adaptability of mind, proficiency of mental body, proficiency of mind, rectitude of mental body, and rectitude of mind. B, 6 particular wholesome factors: right speech, right action, right livelihood, collectively called the 3 factors of abstinence, compassion and appreciative joy, together called the 2 boundless states, and wisdom. In the suttas, volitional formation, sankhara, are normally defined as the 6 kinds of volitions pertaining to form, sound, smells, taste, tangible objects, and mental objects. And then we get to the 5th aggregate, vijnana, consciousness. It is divided into 6 factors according to the pathways by which it originates: awareness of objects by way of eye, by the way of ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. The Abhidhamma refers to the consciousness aggregate as chitta, and it divides the chitta into either 89 or 121 types of consciousness. Divided according to the state or level of consciousness: 54 sense-sphere states of consciousness, 15 fine material states of consciousness, 12 immaterial states of consciousness, and 8 transcendent states of consciousness. These may be divided into more detail, resulting in 40 transcendent states of consciousness. Divided according to the quality of mind, there's 12 unwholesome states of consciousness, 21 wholesome states of consciousness, 36 kama resultant states of consciousness, in the detailed analysis 52, and 20 functional states of consciousness. It is unnecessary in this presentation to list all of these various states of consciousness, and it may even cause confusion for the reader. Appendix 2, which is chapter 1.8. Commentarial explanation of perception. The commentaries describe the following function and attributes of perception sanya. Its unique attribute is sanjnana, recognition, remembering. Its function is to establish a sign as a key for memory so that in the future one knows that this is such and such. This function is similar to a carpenter who marks a piece of wood. Its result is an attachment to those established signs. This is similar to a blind man who touches an elephant and consequently identifies an elephant with that part of its body that he has touched, its footprint. The object as it appears resembles how a fawn sees a scarecrow and believes it to be a real human being. In comparison to Western psychological terms, sanya encompasses perception, conception as a mental representation, and recognition, and to a certain degree, but not exclusively, to memory. This ends Chapter 1 in the book Buddhadhamma.